We're an island nation, drawn to the sea that surrounds us. A playground for some. For others, it's where they make their living. But the sea's unpredictable.
Things can go wrong in seconds.
When you're out in the boat, every minute counts.
There to save our lives is a volunteer army of over 5,000 ordinary people, ready to leave their jobs, their families, and race to our rescue.
When the pager goes off, your body's full of adrenaline.
Okay guys, go, go, go.
There's potentially a family out there with somebody missing.
Okay.
If it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't be here today.
We'll get you out of here.
They definitely saved my life.
Yep.
Equipped with their own cameras, the crews give us a unique insight into every call-out.
Hey, grab a hand.
As only they see it.
You're doing really, really well, buddy. Guys, we need to get him in. Get him in, get him in.
For those who risk their lives, it has become a way of life.
To know that you've helped save a life.
Let's get you in.
It's such an awesome feeling.
Hold on!
Nestled between Swansea and Cardiff on the southwest coast of Wales lies the small resort town of Porthcawl.
I would describe Porthcawl as your classic seaside town. We've got beautiful beaches, plenty of chip shops, amusement parks, plenty of water sports, so you get the full seaside experience, and the classic donkey rides as well.
I've lived in Porthcawl all my life, lucky enough to be born here. It's lovely in the summer, we've got some amazing beaches, some amazing coastline.
Watching over this stretch of coast is Porthcawl's lifeboat station, which first opened back in 1860.
The coastline in Porthcawl is quite treacherous. We have very fast-moving tide. We have all of the water coming from the Atlantic, so we do get quite big waves and quite big storms as well. So it is quite a scary place to be sometimes.
The Porthcawl crew deal with around 70 call-outs each year, with many of them involving its notorious rip currents, narrow channels of fast-flowing water travelling from the shore back out to sea.
You see the rip, it's literally coming off the point here and then running out to sea towards a rock called Tusker Rock. They tend to form, particularly here in Porthcawl, by just the sheer mass of tidal range and the body of water moving up the channel. As it hits rocks and bays, will create rips that can go in all sorts of different directions. It doesn't matter how much of a good swimmer you are, you will not fight a rip. And that's simply because it's relentless, it doesn't stop. It will just keep going at whatever speed it's taking you at. I've attended many, many rescues where, as a direct result of somebody being caught out by a rip, they haven't come home.
A cold but sunny afternoon in October. The crew are just returning from a routine training exercise.
Me and my fellow crew member were going off to go and get some lunch. We were probably about 20, 30 metres away from the lifeboat station, and then we suddenly hear our names being called to come back and the sirens being sounded.
Multiple calls have come in about a male swimmer in difficulty just off Porthcawl's seafront.
When it's a person in the water, you definitely know someone's life is at risk. So the adrenaline kicks in.
Every person on the lifeboat steps up a gear. We all know that every second counts, and so it's really, really important that we're as quick and safe as we possibly can be.
Happy?
Within just 3 minutes, the station's Atlantic 85 is back on the water. And the crew head towards the swimmer's last reported position at Outfall Point, a mile west of the station.
So this area, it's not a very safe place to swim, just with the rocks and the tide, especially if we've got quite a lot of swell coming through.
As we launched and hit the water, I remember being struck by how much of a lovely sunny day it was. But then as we rounded the pier, I specifically remember the waves pounding the coastline, realising that If there was anybody anywhere near that, they were really, really in a dangerous position.
Just 4 minutes after launching, the crew approach outfall point and start scanning the water.
Our eyes were all focused on the surf line, assuming that the casualty would have been in the surf. We had no information as to what this person was wearing, why they were in the water, and how they were doing. We had nothing.
The tidal range that we have here, it's always a risk that the casualty can drift, especially with the rip currents around here as well. They can throw you out where they like.
On the beach, having alerted the Coast Guard, the casualty's wife and son are now watching on helplessly.
If I'm being honest, I've never been so scared in my life. He was by the rocks. He was trying so hard. And I just said to myself, screw it. I go run in and save him. I can't lose my dad. You know, he means everything to me. But my mum told me not to. She shouted in my face and told me not to do it.
The waves were so big and powerful, they were just pushing him into the rocks. You can't do anything, you're just panicking. It was really scary.
The casualty has now been in the water for over 15 minutes. But with no sign of him near outfall point, the concern is that he's been dragged further out to sea.
In the time that I'm stood up scanning the water edge, looking in the surf, there's potentially somebody meters away from me drowning.
So many things were going through my head. My dad is suffering out there. I couldn't tell myself that, you know, he was gonna die.
We were struggling to locate him. I think I stood up to get myself a better view, and then I spotted something.
Here, support. Oh, there.
It was a bit like, no, it can't be.
He was quite far away from the shoreline, and we were shocked at how quickly he had drifted out as well.
The crew raced to the figure in the water, now 300 meters offshore.
Okay, buddy. Okay. All right, just move.
It's all right, we'll get you. Just relax, okay?
Go on. Sorry, Sam. Sorry.
What's your name?
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna be here, mate. I don't know.
So as soon as we got alongside, you could see the relief in his eyes. We're just gonna spin you around in a second, and we're just gonna lift you up with your arms, okay? We've got you. We just reassured him that not to panic, not to get any more worried, that we were here to help him.
Yeah, bringing the casualty on board now. We're gonna look to make a hasty recovery.
Ready, 1, 2, 3.
Medical assessment to 6.
Ready, and again, 1, 2, 3. Okay?
Right, you okay?
For a second, all right? Yeah.
Guys, we need to get him in. Get him in. Right, come on, Ian.
Swing your
Let's go on the boat.
legs, okay?
Right, okay.
As soon as they dragged my dad on the boat, I was so thrilled. I could breathe again.
But although he's safely on board the lifeboat, the casualty is not yet out of danger.
He was exhausted. You could see in his face that he'd been in the water a bit too long. Yeah, very short of breath. Didn't have much to say. He wasn't in a great way.
You're really, really cold. We can feel you cold to touch. So we're going to put this over the top of you. All right.
I think it was at that stage he'd come out of fight or flight and the shock had hit him.
What I'm going to do is then just do a little bit of a casualty assessment on you, okay?
Yeah.
So adrenaline is running through your body, the relief that you've seen the lifeboat come to you, and then as soon as you are relaxed, that's when things can go wrong.
He was very quiet and almost vacant, which started to ring alarm bells for us.
Have you swallowed any water?
Swallowed it.
I think we'll need an ambulance. We did an initial assessment, and our first question is if he had swallowed any water, to which he said he has swallowed some. He couldn't tell us how much, but some can cause a lot of damage.
Inhaling seawater can cause a delayed reaction, in which excess fluid drawn into the lungs reduces oxygen levels in the blood.
We're going to give you some oxygen, okay, just to help with your breathing.
The casualty was obviously short of breath. His breathing rate wasn't right, so we all agreed that we'd administer oxygen.
If left untreated, this condition can be fatal. The crew head back to station at full speed so the casualty can receive urgent medical attention.
As we got back to the lifeboat station, we brought the casualty inside to warm him up and just check that he was okay. Shortly followed by an ambulance that arrived to check him over, and then his wife and his son.
He wasn't great because he was shaking a lot.
He had oxygen on and everything. They were checking him over and then they said they were going to take him to hospital. I wasn't expecting that. I just started to panic a bit.
The casualty, Ian, is rushed to the Princess of Wales Hospital in Bridgend to be assessed further.
Being in a rip current, it's like swimming against a real powerful force. You can swim and you just stay where you are. And it's scary. It really is scary.
Ian had travelled from Barry with his wife Jane and son Ewan for a day out on Porthcawl Beach and one of his regular dips.
I just enjoy swimming in general, swimming in the sea. I just find it invigorating. My wife and my son, they always watch me from the shoreline. They always have. So when I was in the water, I was swimming up and down and it felt fine. But then within 10 minutes, the swell suddenly picked up and I could feel the swell. And I thought, there's something wrong here. I've got to get in.
Before Ian had any time to get out of danger, he found himself being dragged towards the rocks at Outfall Point.
You feel out of control because of the power of the waves. They're just overwhelming. I was getting pushed towards the rocks. Literally, it was every few seconds. These big 6-foot waves are smashing on top of me. It was like being in a washing machine. And at that time, for a brief few seconds, my life flashed before me. I knew I was in trouble. That lack of control was scary, really scary. I was just getting smashed and smashed and smashed, and it was relentless. And I thought, I gotta swim here and get out of this because I wasn't going anywhere. So I just put my head down and I literally swam for my life.
Ian managed to get away from the rocks, but then found himself being dragged out to sea by a rip current.
After that, I had nothing left. So I floated. Nothing left. That's all I could do was shout for help. I couldn't tread water, so I just floated. When I was floating, I was thinking of my wife and thinking of my son because I felt more sorry for them seeing the situation I put myself in. And they can do nothing about it. Being in that rip current, probably 5 minutes away from death, thinking, am I going to live or am I going to die?
But by now, Jane and Ewan had called 999, and help was on its way.
When I saw the lifeboat, it was a wave of relief coming over me, yes.
You okay, buddy?
That sense of relief was powerful, yeah.
Steady, and again. 1, 2, 3. Okay?
If it was another 5 minutes, I don't know what I would have done, to tell you the truth.
How do you feel now?
Wow.
A bit better?
You appreciate life a lot more. Yeah. Changes your aspects of life. Having a near-death experience. Yeah.
At hospital, Ian was treated for fluid on his lungs before being discharged later that day.
Oh, I've never been more relieved in my life. I was just so happy that he was okay. That was probably the most important thing to me, that my dad was going to live. They saved my dad's life, and in a way they saved my life and my mum's life for bringing a piece of our family home.
Without doubt, if the casualty hadn't been rescued, he wouldn't be here today.
I wouldn't have survived, no. So they saved my life. 100%. It's overwhelming, yes. Just that sheer sense that people are there to help you. There's just not any words to say. Thank you. That's all I could say. There's nothing else.
The RNLI respond to over 9,000 shouts every year. And what often gets people into trouble in the first place are the hidden dangers.
The sea should be respected. The sea has currents, big waves, people get themselves into difficulties.
Often things that catch people out, whilst they seem obvious to some, just aren't so obvious to them. So people aren't aware of the hazards of tides and how the sea can change quite rapidly.
It's okay, mate. You're going to blow towards us now.
What can appear to be a slow-moving tide can quickly turn and rapidly come in.
Gonna get you, okay? You're fine now.
So you end up being surrounded by water.
Yeah, clear hand. Contact.
It's not something that is always easy to spot.
I've got you. I've got you. I've got you.
The wind has its own personality, and all of a sudden it can really push and force and move you very quickly.
Yeah. How are you feeling? Breathing.
Hidden dangers can and will always catch people out. The sea can look so inviting, but what's underneath is really, really difficult to know.
In Cornwall, lying just above Land's End, is the most westerly lifeboat station in mainland England, Senon Cove.
We're right down here on the very end, stuck out in the Atlantic, so there's nothing between us and America. Absolutely beautiful place, lovely beach, lots of people visit here in the summer, lots of water sports carried out here, particularly surfing, and it's beautiful on its day.
The other end of the scale is if you've got heavy swell, wind, rain, freezing cold, it's not a nice place to be. It can be quite wild here. We get the first of the weather arriving, and often if it's been building across the Atlantic, then it can be quite nasty, yeah.
And in the firing line of all this weather are the busy shipping lanes just off Senon Cove, with hundreds of large vessels moving between the Atlantic, the Irish Sea and the English Channel each day.
All the main shipping that's going around Land's End will go past here using what's called the TSS, the Traffic Separation Scheme.
Has a northbound lane and a southbound lane. Many ships going up and down that all day, every day.
10 miles southwest of Senon Cove is one of the main navigational landmarks for all this shipping traffic. The 130-foot-high Wolf Rock Lighthouse.
It's quite an isolated building just on a rock. It almost gives the impression of just rising up out of the sea.
It's an isolated danger, so there's nothing around it. It's certainly a very hostile spot.
Towering above a vast submerged rock, the lighthouse took 8 years to build and was completed in 1869.
Before the lighthouse was built, clearly that rock would have claimed a lot of vessels and a lot of lives.
I guess that would have been the driving force years ago for a lighthouse to be built there at great effort.
Before becoming fully automated in 1988, the lighthouse was manned for over a century.
I believe they did a month on, a month off. And I can only imagine it must have been quite frightening down there at times.
Today, Wolf Rock's solar-powered lamp has a range of 16 miles, and it even has its very own helipad.
When conditions are at its worst, the sea can reach the top of the lighthouse, and I believe they've lost bits of the helipad off the top before, which gives you an idea of how bad it can be.
Early July. A fresh morning with winds gusting at over 30 miles an hour.
That day would have been maintenance with the boat, would have been a very mundane day at the station, as far as we knew.
But the Coast Guard has received a mayday call, a distress signal meaning that lives are in grave and imminent danger.
We were informed that there was a large merchant vessel that had machinery failure
and in danger of drifting towards Wolf Rock Lighthouse.
Within 12 minutes, Senon Cove's Tamar-class all-weather lifeboat is on the water and rushing the 10 miles to Wolf Rock.
The Coast Guard passed us the position of the ship and we plotted it, and it was worryingly close to Wolf Rock. If she's on course, then she's going to hit it before we even get there. That was when we realised that this was perhaps a bit more serious than we first thought.
When we were about halfway down there, we could visually see the vessel with the Wolf Rock Lighthouse in front of it.
We were listening to the comms, and it became apparent quite early on that it was very likely they were going to go aground on the Wolf.
With the cargo ship now within a few hundred meters of running aground, Senon Cove's neighbouring station, Penlee, are also called out.
They just go off. Thankfully, we were all sort of there having a cup of coffee, so it was a very quick launch for us. I remember thinking that's going to take a lot of stopping.
The Mazarine is a 31,000-ton cargo ship, steaming from Southern Ireland to Belgium with 25 people on board. She suffered engine failure and has drifted at speed towards Wolf Rock.
It was a large merchant ship and the sides do act like a sail. I think she was probably drifting at something like 2 knots, which is quite a rate if you're going towards a lighthouse particularly.
With his engines failed, the Mazarine's captain is now desperately trying to halt his drift by dropping anchor, with seemingly little effect.
It was quite tense because it really isn't something that you see very often. A big ship like that next to a lighthouse. So yeah, a lot of concern and a lot of uncertainty about what we were going to be faced with.
Due to the Mazarine's size, the Coast Guard has requested that a deep-sea salvage tug be called out to help tow it away from Wolf Rock. But it has to come from Falmouth, 50 miles away, and it will take around 5 hours to arrive. And the Mazarine is now just meters away from the lighthouse.
If a ship like that sinks, you've got the obvious risk to life. You've got the loss of the ship itself. You've also got the lighthouse itself and the potential damage to that structure. So it was a really serious situation.
Before either lifeboat even makes it on scene, the cargo ship runs aground.
Everyone's thoughts on board turns towards a sinking and casualty evacuation sort of mode.
We did start going through in our minds what we were going to need to do. Are they going to need to get off the boat? And if they're going to need to get off, then how are they going to go about it? The captain was incredibly calm and collected, but I think if you looked out of the window on the bridge, you'd have been looking in through a window on a lighthouse.
It was quite an incredible scene, really, to see a ship that size alongside the lighthouse. Quite a frightening sight, really, to see a ship that close to them. When a ship's on the rocks, you can hear a little bit of grinding of metal against granite rock as the ship's moving up and down.
Metal meets granite never tends to end that well, so you're certainly bracing yourself for what we would say is the inevitable.
With the tug still several hours away and the lifeboats unable to tow such a huge vessel, the Senon Cove and Penlee crews can only wait on standby.
The worst case scenario would have been that the ship was sinking and that the crew were going to have to abandon ship.
You have damp lifeboats.
Most vessels that size have what's called a free-fall lifeboat, which they had. My question to the master was, have you got capacity in that lifeboat for everybody on board? And he said yes.
Freefall lifeboats are released at height from the stern of a vessel.
The freefall lifeboat works well if it's got open water underneath it, but you've obviously got the concern of the proximity of the lighthouse. It wouldn't have been a pleasant thing to do if they had to abandon ship.
The Mazarine skipper knows that the longer he's on the rocks, the greater the chances of his hull sustaining serious damage. So in a last-ditch effort, he tries a high-risk maneuver, raising the ship's anchor.
When the captain decided to lift his anchor, I kind of questioned, was she going to be able to get off?
The Mazarine skipper is banking on the 30-mile-an-hour winds, pushing his vessel away from the rocks.
At one stage there, it looked very, very doubtful whether she would be able to get off. The ship started to move, and it was quite incredible, really. The wind got hold of it, and she blew away from the lighthouse, which was amazing to see.
Although the Mazarine is now off the rocks, the fear is that it may have been damaged by the impact of the collision.
So our initial request was to carry out a hull inspection, so both lifeboats proceeded to circuit the Mazarine to see if there was any breaches. Obviously we're not going to see too much under the waterline, but if there was anything breached above the waterline, we would certainly be able to see it.
The crew's inspection of the hull doesn't reveal any obvious damage, but then Sen and Cove receive a message from the Mazarine's skipper. Water-filled ballast tanks are designed to stabilize a vessel at sea. If they're breached, a ship can start to sink within minutes.
The skipper of the vessel called to say that they'd ruptured 4 ballast tanks. That was a huge concern because things can deteriorate so quickly when you've got water leaking into a ship's hull. Is she going to be able to stay afloat with her pumps? Are we still going to have to evacuate the crew? So there's all sorts of thoughts going through my mind at the time.
To complicate matters further, the gale force winds and incoming tide are now taking the Mazarine in the worst possible direction.
The ship was then on a course to go ashore on the mainland.
She was drifting at 2.5 knots towards Land's End. Felt a bit helpless, really, you know, because we haven't got the capacity or the power or the equipment to tow these sorts of vessels. So we'd be there trying to get crew off in difficult conditions.
Land's End is just 9 miles away. At this drift rate, the Mazarine will run aground there in roughly 3 hours, if she doesn't start sinking first.
It felt like a very delicate situation. If they can't continue to pump the water, they will then struggle to stay afloat.
So the consideration is then, is that tug going to get there in time? Are they going to be able to put a tow on it? So that was our main worry at that point.
The cargo ship's pumps work overtime and manage to stem the flow for now, buying precious time. And as the tide turns, there's soon a helping hand from the wind too.
The weather conditions changed throughout the day and her drift changed course away from the land, which was nice to see. So yeah, big relief.
Drifting back out to sea, for now the Mazarine is out of immediate danger. But both lifeboat crews must still remain alongside her until the tug arrives to take over.
Hopefully the ship's crew appreciated seeing lifeboats there in attendance with them. We sometimes underestimate, just by being there, what that does to a crew.
The Penley and Sen and Cove crews can only sit tight and wait.
It's never an uplifting moment when you're potentially going to have to sort of stand by and essentially bob around for 6 hours, but we've got a job to do.
I think naturally after the first hour or two and the adrenaline's starting to wear off, you start to turn your mind towards hunger.
You can get hungry out there if you haven't eaten before you go. We tend to live off pot noodles, cup of soups and chocolate bars.
Our coxswain decided that the best plan of attack for his impending hangar was to eat an out-of-date tin of corned beef that had gone out of date 5 years ago.
Everyone was afraid to eat it, but I thought it was all right. Tasted all right to me anyway.
Finally, nearly 5 hours after the lifeboats arrived, the tug also makes it on scene.
When the tug arrived, it was a very welcome sight because we saw that as an end to the situation.
The tug gets a line attached to the Mazarine and begins the 50-mile journey back to Falmouth.
It was a relief to see the fact that they got it in tow and the situation ended as well as it did.
Having been at sea for almost 8 hours, the Sennen Cove lifeboat begins the long journey back to their station, followed shortly after by Penlee.
The feeling from that shout was a sense of relief, and I think the relief was that the boat came away without any risk to life.
Woolfrock was fine. Thankfully, the vessel didn't hit the lighthouse. The lighthouse is fine, but it was quite close. So the Mazarine, she's in Falmouth dry docks. Been told that the damage has been quite extensive, so I think she's going to be in the dry dock for quite a long time. It wasn't a neat show. Yeah, we've never been tasked to assist in a vessel that sort of size, and hopefully we won't ever again either.
Just goes to show how unpredictable lifeboating is. When that pager goes off, you never know what's in store for you. So expect the unexpected, that's for sure.
"430 miles away in Scotland, lying on the banks of the Firth of Forth, is the town of North Berwick.
North Berwick's a picture postcard town. In the Victorian era, it was called the Biarritz of the North, due to its sun and its sea.
It's a really popular place for people visiting from Edinburgh. They can be here in half an hour or 45 minutes, so during the summer we get a lot of people coming to enjoy the seaside.
In the 1960s, a surge in leisure activities led to North Berwick becoming an unlikely hotspot.
North Berwick has one of the driest and sunniest climates in the whole of Britain. Under its brilliant skies, young families amuse themselves, having fun on the fringe of the sea and acquiring a Mediterranean tan.
Everyone takes to the beaches and out onto the water. There'll be swimming. People also often are on their sit-on-top kayaks, as well as taking to the water in powerboats and yachts or sailing boats.
The more adventurous people on their kayaks like to go out and explore some of the islands. The bays around the area is quite sheltered and really good conditions for paddleboarding.
Summer is peak season for visitors, and with so many people on the water, it's the busiest time for the lifeboat crew.
I think the biggest dangers on our patch are typically offshore winds.
Offshore winds can be really dangerous because they're blowing right out to sea. And quite often, especially with stand-up paddleboards, you're not necessarily aware that the wind is blowing offshore until it's already got hold of you and sending you out to sea. You're going to really struggle to get back in against that wind. Those hidden dangers catch people out all the time.
Late afternoon in August, another bumper day for North Berwick's beaches.
It was a really warm Sunday afternoon. There was a slight offshore wind, and it felt that with so many people on the water that you might hear the pagers go.
Sure enough, at 4 o'clock, an urgent call comes into the Coast Guard about a capsized kayak near one of the islands, just a few hundred meters from the station.
Whenever we hear that there's somebody potentially in the water, then it does make the response time critical.
The water is never particularly warm, so it's not a place that you'd want to be without the right clothing and equipment for a long period of time. So it's a matter of us getting to them as quickly and safely as possible and getting them out.
7 minutes after being paged, the crew prepared to launch their D-class lifeboat.
We were told the kayakers were in between two islands, which is quite a vague position. But as we hit the water and spoke to the Coast Guard, we got an update.
This is Aberdeen Coast Guard. We have a person in the water from a capsized kayak in the vicinity of Craigleith Island.
The crew head to the kayaker's reported position, near Craigleith Island, almost a mile north of the station.
When someone's in the water, it's absolutely a time-critical call-out. It's our most serious call-out, really. That person is keeping themselves afloat, but they're only going to survive for a certain amount of time, so we need to get there as quickly as possible.
Responding to the Coast Guard alert, other vessels are also now making their way to the casualties' location.
Yeah, visual there, in between the Sula and the sailboat.
The Sula, a local tourist vessel, is already on scene.
It makes life a lot easier when there's another boat on scene. It's obviously something that's a lot easier for us to see than somebody in the water.
That's a couple each we've got visual with them thereabouts. Definitely right from the Sula at the moment.
As we got up to the casualties, I saw one of them was kind of lying on top of his upturned kayak.
How you doing, guys? Okay, so you've been in about 10 minutes.
The guy in the water, he looked cold and he was obviously a bit shocked. He'd been in the water for maybe 10 minutes, so it being there and being able to get him out was important.
What I'll do is I'll just pull you towards us. What we'll do is we'll grab you under your shoulders, if that's all right, and we'll just pull you in. There we are, good job.
Casualty who had been in the water was obviously pretty cold. He was very relieved to be back on board, and we did a quick check that he was okay before turning to the other casualty.
Do you want to pop on here as well? How are you feeling temperature-wise?
I'm just a little bit cold.
He was shivering a bit. He had a buoyancy aid on, but had shorts and t-shirt, so was feeling a bit cold. So we got him into something just to try and keep him a little bit warmer.
There we are, good job. That just might keep you slightly a bit warmer. You happy?
The crew heads straight to shore, where the casualties can be warmed up back at the lifeboat station.
It feels like things are pretty much, under control. We just have to run them into the beach, and that'll be the job done.
It's changed a bit since this morning. We were out this morning on training, and there was absolutely nothing.
But as we were approaching the harbour, the Coast Guard radioed us up.
When you are finished with your current casualties, I have a second tasking for you. Over.
Back-to-back shouts aren't unheard of, but they are quite unusual.
With another group of kayakers reported to be in difficulty further along the coast, the crew must hand the casualties over to the shore team before heading straight out to their next tasking.
No medical, no. Yeah.
It always makes you change your step again. You've gone from, yes, we've recovered the casualties, we're just taking them back to the station, to suddenly, okay, someone else is in danger, we're going to need to start the process again.
Okay, happy? Let's go.
Having dropped off the casualties, the crew start making their way to Seacliff Beach, 3 miles east.
I think 2 kayakers at Seacliff and 2 further kayakers or paddleboard.
When we had the original information of 4 people on the water, your immediate thoughts are they all together? Are they separated?
You get that, 4 people, mix of kayaks and paddleboards.
What the best way of attacking it is going to be when you get there.
To make matters worse, the tide has just started going out, and the offshore wind has picked up. The concern is that the casualties could be getting pushed further out to sea.
See that slightly yellowy pink thing on the ship's head? I don't know if that's a buoy or...
As we're heading to the scene, we're looking ahead of us to see if we can see anyone being blown offshore, or are they closer into shore.
And to the left of it, is that a flag?
It's quite hard when you're looking at a distance. There's things like lobster pots with little flags on top. They might look like someone standing on a stand-up paddleboard.
As the crew head to location, an update comes over the radio. The casualties are all paddleboarders rather than kayakers. There are as many as 4 of them in total, and 2 of them are now in the water.
That does change the seriousness of the shout. Obviously, we're still trying to get there as fast as we can, but your sort of anticipation goes up. And what are you going to be faced by when you arrive on the scene?
I think there's something blue in the lump of the rock.
But with so many other people out on the water, identifying the casualties isn't straightforward.
See, there's like a blue thing and some people.
It can be really confusing. When we arrived on scene initially, we came across a guy on a paddleboard who was actually on the rocks.
He's okay, he's having a fish. Very good.
We realised that he was fine. He gave us a thumbs up, and then we carried on towards the beach because one of the crew had spotted another paddleboarder closer to the beach.
There's someone over there.
As we arrived, I could see that there was someone sat down on a paddleboard. And as we got even closer, I could see that there was another paddleboard next to them.
That's two. That's two stand-up paddleboards.
And in the distance, there was another paddleboard.
There's another one there as well.
We've got one of the casualties, but we've also got two empty paddleboards.
So, is everyone accounted for? So everyone else is on shore, and it's just you?
The first thing we want to make sure is that there's no one else in any danger. It was really good to see that those casualties had made it safe ashore, so that's a relief for us, as we've only got one casualty there in the water to think about.
Aberdeen Coast Guard, this is North Bay Lifeboat. Yeah, we've located the first informant on a paddleboard. The rest are on shore.
They were fortunately anchored. None of us had actually come across a paddleboard being anchored before, so it was a bit of a game changer. It was really useful, stop any drifting.
Once we got the casualty on board, you could tell that they were pretty shaken. We decided we'd just take them straight back to the beach. They didn't seem to be in any medical distress, just needed a bit of reassurance.
I didn't want to call out unnecessary.
No.
My friend was like, I only paddled a short distance and I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And the other two were out there, but
They were pretty calm. Mainly they were worried that they'd put us out by calling us there. So we were able to reassure them that they'd done absolutely the right thing.
Did you go in the water at all?
I fell in once, but I'm okay.
Okay, you didn't take in any water or anything like that?
No,
Okay,
yeah,
you're all good.
no,
And you've got a life jacket on, so that's good news.
At the time, I felt incredibly hopeless and helpless. Just this feeling that my friends are being taken off to sea and potentially going to die just kind of like was blowing my mind a little bit.
Sally had driven down from Edinburgh with 3 friends for a spot of paddleboarding at Seacliff Beach.
So all of us are all beginners. All of us have mostly just started this summer. We all went out into the water together, and what we tend to do is that we just stay close to the shore and we just like paddle around. And there's a beautiful castle on the cliffs just to the left of the beach. So we ended up going out a little bit further than I expected to try and get a picture of the castle and a picture of us out there as well.
But unaware of the strengthening offshore wind, the 4 of them soon found themselves being pushed further out to sea.
The currents were a bit stronger than we thought they were. So one minute, all 4 of us were together, quite happy, laughing, trying to get photos, and the next, everything had changed. It was actually really difficult for me to paddle back. I was finding that I was making a little bit of gain, but I was getting really tired quite quickly.
As Sally struggled, the group became separated, and 2 of them fell off their paddleboards.
I felt slightly scared because that was the initial signs for me that we were in a bit more of a dangerous situation than I thought we were. It was at that moment that we did decide to call Coast Guard because we weren't sure what was happening.
After 20 minutes of battling against the wind, Sally's friends anchored their paddleboards and attempted to swim the few hundred meters back to shore, leaving Sally alone.
I knew I wasn't able to swim back, partly because I do have a bad shoulder. I'm also not a strong swimmer. So I watched them swim back to the rocks and get on the rocks. I was alone on the paddleboard, and that scared me quite a bit.
Terrified of falling into the water and becoming separated from the anchored boards, Sally clung on and waited for help to arrive.
I hadn't realized how tired I was, like complete exhaustion, both emotionally and physically. So my friends had now made it to the beach, and I can see them, they're waving at me. I didn't realize the lifeboat was coming at me because my back was toward the ocean. And when I turned around and saw the lifeboat, there was just this huge sense of relief.
45 minutes after setting off from Seacliff Beach, Sally was finally returned to be reunited with the rest of the group.
When I got back to the beach again, there was this lovely sense of just calm and peace, and just that we were all okay.
They were all quite new to paddleboarding, and it was something that they did very well to manage. Although they didn't quite have the experience to get themselves ashore, they had the equipment to make sure that they remained safe until we were able to help.
Before heading back to station, the crew retrieved the paddleboards and the little anchors that stopped them from drifting much further out to sea.
Done. It's awesome, that.
Those anchors completely changed how severe that incident could have become. Without those anchors, the point that they're at, that opens up into the North Sea, and the wind's blowing them out into open water.
Nifty little anchors, these. Those are brilliant.
I personally am very, very appreciative of the lifeboat crew. They knew the situation, they knew how to take care of me. They really saved the day that day.
330 miles away on the north bank of the River Thames is the leafy West London district of Chiswick.
Chiswick, beautiful part of London. There's many places within and around Chiswick that you can visit, that you can close your eyes and you wouldn't even know that you were that close to London.
Over 40 miles from the coast, and one of only 4 stations along the River Thames, Chiswick watches over a patch that stretches from Teddington in the east to Battersea Power Station in the west.
The River Thames is London's coastline. There's almost 100 miles of waterfront, of river frontage available for everyone in the city to enjoy.
The area of the river is tidal. The water never stops moving. It's a wide, big river with a lot of activity. There's a lot of piers, pontoons, islands, a lot of obstructions and buoys in the river. And there's a lot of rowing, there's a lot of pleasure craft. And if you don't understand, how the river works, how the tides operate, then people can kind of get in a bit of spot of bother.
Chiswick Lifeboat Station was established in response to one of the worst tragedies to occur on the Thames in recent history.
The death toll from yesterday's collision on the River Thames between a dredger and a pleasure boat could reach 63 and may go even higher.
The Marchioness was a party boat in 1989 full of young partygoers, and tragically it was hit by a bigger boat, a dredger.
The Bow Bell was a heavier vessel, so when it rode up on top, it pushed the Marchioness under the water.
The Marchioness had about 125 people on board. It turned over and sank in minutes, spilling screaming, panic-stricken revellers into the fast-flowing river.
That night, a total of 51 people lost their lives in the waters of the Thames.
All of us who work in the rescue community on the river in London, you have to remember the Marchioness, because it was a pinnacle moment for change.
Following an inquiry into the disaster, in 2002, 4 lifeboat stations opened along the Thames. All are crewed around the clock, and Tower and Chiswick stations have the fastest boat in the RNLI's fleet at their disposal.
We have the E-Class lifeboat, which is a twin jet-propelled boat, which means that it's phenomenally fast. It does about 45 knots top speed, meaning we can get anywhere on our patch in a very short space of time.
Our objective is really simple. We want no one to drown. And every year, some still do. And we need to keep trying to stop that happening.
A warm summer's evening. The tide is on its way out, and the Chiswick crew are already out on the river.
We were on the boat and we saw a party boat come past. It was a pretty common sight. The disco lights were blaring out of the top deck.
And the boat started to turn, which looked a bit strange because some boats come up, turn and go back to central London, but not at 10 o'clock in the evening. That's when they're coming to an end. As they started to turn, we got a message coming through saying, we require emergency assistance. We have no propulsion.
Without engine power, the party boat is now drifting at speed with the tide and is in danger of colliding with anything in its path.
A few hundred yards downriver from where they were, there's a large group of houseboats that are moored on that pier. So we knew we had to get in there and get something on that in order to get control of it.
The crew immediately raced towards the stricken vessel.
I just quickly briefed the guys and said, right, we need to get a bowline and a bowspring on straight away so that I can pull that vessel out of the way.
It only takes Chiswick's E-Class a minute to reach the party boat, now just 80 metres from the houseboats at Wandsworth's Riverside Pier.
I asked the skipper how many people on board. 51 was the number, which immediately rings bells.
You kind of straight away think about the 51 people that perished on the Marchioness disaster. Different scenario completely, but nevertheless, brings it home.
We knew immediately we didn't have very long to get it back under control before the situation was going to get bad quite quickly.
With the party in full flow and the passengers blissfully unaware that the 30-metre vessel has lost all power, the Chiswick crew must quickly establish a tow to bring it under control.
We position our lifeboat touching and next to the casualty vessel, and we put on a series of lines to brace ourselves to the casualty vessel.
You're going to tow a vessel for a length of time, you want to be towing it astern. If you've got to manoeuvre it at some point, then you want to bring it in alongside so it's more close quarter.
But establishing a tow is only half the job. The E-Class now has to pull the party boat away from the houseboats, avoiding the dozens of other vessels that pass through this part of the Thames every hour.
Stand by.
We've not towed anything as big or heavy as that before with the E-Class lifeboat.
At over 100 tons, the party boat weighs almost 15 times more than the Chiswick lifeboat.
We know what the lifeboats are capable of, and I was confident that the plan that we came up with would work.
We're moving forward, Mark, but it's not pretty slow.
I looked over to the starboard side of the channel and put some power on our boat, and I could see that we were definitely moving.
We've moved about 10 metres since I've been back in. Speeding up now.
I was happy that we were making way with this vessel alongside.
Well, I know we've got steering, yeah, we'll leave it as it is, then you can steer. Okay.
I was communicating with the skipper. Initially, we needed to establish he could steer his own vessel. We knew he had no power.
Yes, he does. Wouldn't be one. Okay.
So he said yes, and so he can assist us with steerage as long as I provide the propulsion at the stern.
With the 435 horsepower E-Class providing the brute force and the party boat providing the steering, the plan is to travel in tandem to the safety of Putney Pier, a mile upriver.
Okay, that's all copied. Nice round of applause coming from them.
Some of the partygoers started to look out of their windows and started communicating with us, offering us drinks, completely oblivious to what was going on.
All right, in a minute.
It was very surreal. They were still partying, we were still doing our job.
I think they thought that the flashing light on our lifeboat was part of their light system.
They didn't have a clue, which in hindsight, I think was brilliant on the behalf of the skipper of that vessel, because had he announced that they had a situation, you've then got 51 people who are going to panic, and you could be dealing with a really, really bad situation.
But while most of the people on board the party boat remain in party mode, the Chiswick crew still have a major job on their hands.
Can you give me any more room on your starboard side for the bridge, please?
When we'd agreed that we were going to Putney Pier, we had a couple of bridges to get through. So there's Fulham Rail Bridge and then Putney Road Bridge. The tide was going out, but there is limited clearance under them.
We've got loads of room on this side of Fulham Rail, so we can do the same, as long as we've got clearance for Putney Bridge.
The concern was Putney Bridge, really, because vessels of this size would predominantly take the middle of the centre arch because of their size. But with me alongside, you've got extra width on the, on the stern of that boat, and we've both got to get through.
The casualty vessel had steerage, we had power, so there was a lot of two-way communication to make sure we were lined up properly.
With the E-Class dwarfed by the party boat and with visibility limited.
Right, so can you tell me where I am?
The crew must work closely with the skipper to navigate through.
I spoke to the captain and asked him if it was possible, if he could go slightly south of centre to give me a little bit more room on my side. So he steered slightly to port to give us that bit of clearance. And we transited through Putney Bridge.
Can you get up on there for me, mate? Putney Pier, up on the spotter or the radar. Spotter'll be fine.
Having made it through Putney Bridge, the crew can now make their approach to the pier, 150 metres away.
Yeah, that door seat's maintaining the speed.
You could see the pier on the plotter. Tim was gauging me from distance, and the captain was giving me the signals, and it just went in lovely.
15 minutes after it lost all power, the party boat is safely secured to Putney Pier.
As soon as I think the party vessel had got its own mooring lines on, then I think they were able to breathe a very deep sigh of relief.
Well, guys, thank you very much. Thanks for your help.
Cooperation and communication between both crews was a major contributor to what made this a really good shout with a really good outcome. Everyone knew what they needed to achieve and got on to do it.
But for the passengers, the party is now well and truly over.
For me, this was definitely the most people I've ever rescued in one shout.
We'll get the lines off now, boys. Pretty good job, that.
Jesus, yeah. Wow.
This did have the potential to be a nasty situation with that size and weight of vessel bearing down on a pontoon full of houseboats. But on the night, it went really, really well.
So we went back to the station, statutory cup of tea. I think we were all slightly wowed by what we'd all just been involved with. It was quite remarkable.
After getting into difficulty in North Berwick, Sally's since had shoulder surgery, but is looking forward to getting back out on the paddleboard.
It's going to be a few months before I can go back in the water again, and I'm kind of sad about that. I'm just really keen and excited to get back properly and get stronger and get better, get more experienced. For next summer, we have a couple paddleboarding trips planned. We're hoping to be able to paddle along the coast and camp out. Hopefully no more lifeboat rescues, fingers crossed.
And after getting caught in a rip current at Porth Call, Ian has wasted no time getting back into the sea. But so far, only near his hometown in Barry.
When I first went in initially for the first couple of times, my wife and my son were very anxious. But a couple of weeks have gone now, and they seem okay about it. They understand that I enjoyed the swimming, so yeah, they're okay about it now. I swim where I know I'm safe, and I'm going to stick to that. I'm not going to swim in any strange environments again. And never go put myself in that predicament again. I could never put my family through that predicament again.